When he told me I was too old for adventure, I believed him, right up until the day he packed his bags for Italy with his secretary. That was when I stopped believing and started acting. My name is Diane. I've been called many things in my life: mother, friend, Helen, volunteer at the church. But for most of my adult years, I was simply his wife. That was the title I wore most proudly, until it became a weight dragging me under. Before I go on, I want to ask something of you. Where are you watching from today? I love imagining the towns, the kitchens, the quiet chairs where people like you sit and listen to my story. It makes me feel a little less alone in all of this. When I first married him, I thought I had won the lottery. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of man who walked into a room and drew every eye. I was quieter, steadier, the one who remembered birthdays and made sure the bills got paid. It felt like balance, his fire, my calm. From the outside, our life looked perfect. But time has a way of peeling back the layers that youthful hope hides. He loved admiration more than intimacy. While I found joy in the small rituals, planting tulips in spring, hosting dinners, traveling to see our grandchildren, he thrived on being noticed, praised, admired. When we were younger, it didn't matter. But as the years passed, I felt him pulling away, as if my aging face no longer fed his ego. The first real sting came at a family dinner. I had been talking about my dream trip, Italy. The canals of Venice, the vineyards of Tuscany, the art of Florence. I could almost taste the olive oil and wine, and I wanted him there with me. He leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Italy's not for the old. You'd just slow me down." The laughter around the table was polite, but my heart cracked a little. I smiled it off, but that night I cried quietly in the bathroom. I told myself he was teasing, but deep down I knew it wasn't a joke. It was how he saw me now, slower, smaller, someone whose world should shrink to the size of our living room. After that, the comments multiplied. "You don't need that dress. Who are you trying to impress? Let the younger folks handle that. Travel's for people with energy, not bad knees." I didn't argue. I had grown used to smoothing things over, making peace instead of making noise. Still, there were moments that made me suspicious. His secretary, half my age, seemed to orbit him with constant energy. I noticed how he lit up in her presence, the way his phone stayed glued to his hand, the texts he brushed off as work. But I wanted to believe the best. We'd been through so much together: children, mortgages, illnesses, family crises. Surely that counted for something, yet the gap between us grew wider. He stayed late at the office, came home restless, critical, impatient. I began to feel invisible. I cooked meals, kept the home, held the threads of our life together, and yet it was as though I had faded into wallpaper. Despite everything, I kept dreaming of that trip. I'd sit with travel magazines, running my fingers over photos of ancient ruins and blue coastlines, whispering to myself, one day. I thought maybe if I could just get him there, we might find each other again. That dream became the turning point of my life. Not because he agreed to go with me, but because of how cruelly he refused. That refusal was the spark that lit everything else on fire. By then, I didn't yet know about Italy. I didn't yet know the full truth about him and the secretary. But the ground beneath our marriage was already shaking, and I was standing on it with my eyes closed, pretending not to feel the tremors. The day I learned the truth about Italy, the world seemed to tilt. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a few words overheard, almost carelessly dropped, but it was enough to unravel years of denial. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary day. I was tidying the kitchen, folding laundry, doing the 1,000 small things that keep a household running. He walked in with that brisk step he used when he wanted to appear busy and important. He barely looked at me, muttering about schedules and deadlines. Then he said it. "I'll be out of town for 2 weeks. Italy, meetings. Don't wait up." Italy. The word hit me like a blow. My Italy. The one dream I had clung to. The place I had begged him to see with me. He said it like it was nothing, like it was a trip to the grocery store. I tried to steady my voice. Italy? Since when are you going to Italy? He waved his hand dismissively. Work. You wouldn't enjoy it. Too much walking. Too much noise. You'd get tired. I stood there, dish towel in my hand, staring at him. His words no longer stung like a tease. They cut like a knife. He wasn't protecting me or sparing me. He was removing me from the picture. For the first time, I didn't swallow my feelings. You always said travel wasn't practical. You said we couldn't afford it, that it was frivolous. Now suddenly it's work? He gave me that look, the one that said the conversation was already over. I don't need to explain everything to you. I have responsibilities. Responsibilities. The word rattled in my head for hours. Later that evening, when he stepped out to take a call, I overheard the soft, too friendly tone in his voice. Not the clipped way he spoke to colleagues, but smooth, light, playful. He said her name, his secretary's name. I sank into a chair, cold spreading through me. There it was, laid bare. He wasn't just going on a business trip. He was going with her. And not only had he denied me the dream I had held onto for decades, he had stolen it for himself with someone else. That night, I didn't cry. Oddly, no tears came. Instead, a stillness settled over me, like a pond when the wind stops. Anger was there, yes, but beneath it was something even stronger. Clarity. In the days that followed, I watched him with new eyes. The careful grooming before work. The sudden gym membership. The way he scrolled through his phone late at night with a faint smile. I realized I had been living with a stranger far longer than I'd admitted. Still, a part of me wanted to scream, to accuse, to demand explanations. But what good would that do? He had already made his choice. His body, his tone, everything told me his mind was already in Italy, walking cobblestone streets with her at his side. One evening, my Helen, an old friend who had seen more than I realized, caught me on the porch. You look tired, she said gently. Is everything all right? For once, I didn't plaster on the usual smile. I just shook my head. And she, bless her, reached out and squeezed my hand. Don't let him make you small. You've got more strength than you know. Her words stuck with me. Maybe because she'd known me before the marriage, before the years of shrinking myself to fit into his world. Maybe because she said it without pity, just fact. That night, while he was asleep, I sat in the quiet of the living room. I stared at the travel magazines tucked away, pages dog-eared and dreams deferred. For years I had begged him to see me, to share my hopes. And here he was, about to live them out with another woman. The betrayal burned, but beneath it, something began to stir. It wasn't just rage at him. It was a fire for myself, a whisper that said, "You are not powerless. You are not done." I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When he returned from Italy, he would not be coming home to the same woman he left behind. Once the shock of betrayal settled, I discovered something surprising. Beneath the anger, beneath the humiliation, there was a strange calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing him, trying to please him, waiting for crumbs of affection. My mind was clear, my focus sharp. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a pen and a pad of paper, almost like a student again. I made a list, not of groceries or chores, but of leverage. Everything we owned, everything we'd built, everything he valued. It wasn't a long list, but it was powerful. His car, our joint accounts, the house deed, the pension we both contributed to. For decades, I had treated those things as ours. Now, I looked at them as rightfully mine. I had poured my life into this marriage, my energy, my health, my youth. I raised the children, managed the home, supported his career. I had invested everything. And now, finally, I was ready to withdraw. The first target was his car. Oh, that car. It wasn't just metal and wheels to him. It was his pride, his proof that he was still young and desirable. A sleek, polished machine he babied more than he ever babied me. He waxed it on weekends, bragged about it to friends, insisted it was an investment. I decided that would be the first thing to go. I called a trusted dealer, and 2 days later he came to look over the car. He named a fair price. I didn't haggle. I simply handed him the keys, signed the papers, and watched as he drove it away. For a moment, my knees nearly gave out. But as the taillights faded, something unexpected washed over me. Freedom. It felt as though invisible chains had slipped from my wrists. Next came the accounts. I walked into the bank wearing a simple cardigan, carrying my tote bag as if it were any other errand. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, recognized my name on the joint account. "Would you like to make a withdrawal?" she asked. "Yes," I said firmly. "All of it," she blinked in surprise. "All of it? All of it," I repeated, my voice steady. When I left the bank with a cashier's check tucked safely in my bag, I felt taller. He had always assumed I'd never touch the money, that I was too timid, too dependent. But every dollar in that account was mine as much as his, and I wasn't about to leave it there for him and his secretary to toast with champagne. The final step was the Jennifer. I booked the appointment quietly, slipping out one morning while he thought I was at the grocery store. She was a seasoned attorney, perhaps a few years younger than me, with sharp eyes and a reassuring voice. I told her everything: the years of belittlement, the Italy trip, the secretary, the accounts, the car. She didn't flinch. She nodded and said, "You've already done the hardest part, deciding you're done. The rest is just paperwork." Hearing that was like a balm. For so long, the marriage had felt like an unmovable wall. But now, piece by piece, I was dismantling it. That day, I filed for divorce. A word I had once feared now tasted like liberation. At home, I carried on as though nothing had changed. I cooked, I cleaned. I smiled politely when Helen's waved. But inside, I was a storm. Every action was deliberate, every step laying the groundwork for his return. I pictured the moment often, him walking through the door expecting me to be docile and forgiving, only to find the car gone, the accounts emptied, his wife no longer waiting but standing tall with divorce papers in hand. That image carried me through those days. Oddly, I wasn't consumed by bitterness. Don't mistake me, I was angry. But the anger wasn't a wildfire anymore. It was a steady flame, controlled and purposeful. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for him. Each night, as I lay in bed alone, I whispered, "He thinks he's in control. Let him. When he comes back, he'll see." While he strolled through piazzas and sipped fine wine with his secretary, I was here quietly rewriting the ending of our story. He believed I'd be waiting. Older. Smaller. Grateful for whatever scraps he brought back. Instead, I was preparing to stand taller than I ever had. His betrayal had given me something unexpected: permission. Permission to stop living in his shadow and finally claim the life that was always mine. While he chased sunsets in Rome and whispered to his secretary under Tuscan skies, I built my own version of Italy at home. It didn't have gondolas or piazzas, but it tasted just as sweet because it was mine. The first morning after he left, I brewed coffee just for myself. No scrambling to make his eggs just so. No rushing to iron his shirts. I sat by the window with my steaming mug and let the silence wash over me. Funny how what once felt lonely now felt peaceful. I could hear birdsong instead of criticism, the hum of the fridge instead of his sighs. I started reclaiming my days. Small steps at first. I joined a John class at the community center. For years I'd told myself I was too busy or too old to try something new. But when I picked up that brush and spread color across the canvas, I felt 10 years younger. The teacher, a cheerful man with paint on his shoes, glanced at my work and said, "You've got an eye for this." No one had complimented me like that in a long time. Not about appearance. Not about usefulness, but about me, my talent. Another afternoon, I went on a day trip with friends to a little coastal town a couple of hours away. We wandered the boardwalk, ate fried clams, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. For the first time in years, I wasn't glancing at the clock, worrying about being home before he noticed. I discovered freedom didn't need a passport. I also began tending the garden with new energy. That small patch of earth behind the house became my own Tuscany. I planted tomatoes, basil, and lavender, digging my hands into the soil. I imagined walking through vineyards and realized I could create beauty right here. Every green sprout felt like a personal victory, proof that growth is always possible, no matter the season of life. Meanwhile, he called a few times from overseas. The first time, his tone was rushed and distracted. "Everything fine back home?" he asked, as though I were just a caretaker for the house. "Everything is fine," I answered simply, leaving out the details of cars sold and accounts emptied. He didn't notice the edge in my voice. He was too busy talking about meetings. On another call, I heard her laughter in the background. He tried to cover the phone, but it was too late. My heart didn't break this time, it hardened. If he was flaunting her presence so openly, then he truly believed I was blind, naive, too weak to act. The irony was almost funny. He thought I was powerless, while I was already building a new life without him. One evening, I went back to the Jennifer's office to finalize documents. Walking in felt like stepping into my future. I wasn't just reacting to his betrayal anymore. I was shaping what came next. Divorce papers signed, financial matters underway. Each signature was a declaration. I am not invisible. I also reconnected with my sister, whom I hadn't seen in years because he always complained she talked too much. We sat on her porch drinking iced tea, and for hours I poured out everything I had kept inside. She listened. She hugged me. Then she laughed softly and said, "You've got more fight in you than he ever gave you credit for." That became a theme, rediscovering the fight. The spark. The woman I used to be before I bent myself into the shape he wanted. I realized how many dreams I had shelved. Books I wanted to read, places nearby I had never explored, friendships I had let go of. While he posed in front of fountains with his secretary, I stood in front of mirrors again, looking at myself not with criticism but with compassion. Wrinkles, silver hair, all of it. I had earned them. They told a story of survival, of years lived, of strength. I was not too old for anything. If anything, I was finally the right age to stop caring about his judgments and start living on my own terms. The days passed quickly, and with each one, I grew lighter. The betrayal still burned, yes, but it also gave me a strange gift. Space. Space to remember who I was, space to breathe, space to imagine. And often I thought of his return. I pictured him walking into the house, smug from his little adventure, expecting me to be waiting with open arms. The image made me smile, not from longing for confrontation, but because I knew the surprise I'd planned would be far sweeter than any Italian wine. While he wandered Italy with another woman, I traveled back to myself. My journey was quieter, but deeper, because Italy without me wasn't the tragedy he imagined. It was the start of my freedom. The day he returned felt like the final act of a long play. I had rehearsed this scene so often in my head that when it finally arrived, I felt no nerves. I was ready. I heard the taxi pull up, the tires crunching on gravel. My heart didn't skip like it once did when he came back from a trip. No fluttering excitement. No breathless anticipation. Just a calm, steady certainty, like a storm finally breaking. The front door swung open and he walked in, suitcase in hand, tanned from the Mediterranean, smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't recognize. He carried that swagger of a man convinced he was returning to a life left perfectly in place. "Well," he said, dropping his bags in the hallway. "Home sweet home." I watched him quietly. His smile, the arrogance in his voice, it was almost laughable. He thought he'd pulled off the perfect lie, the perfect escape. Then his eyes flicked to the driveway and faltered. "Empty. Where's the car?" he asked sharp. "Sold," I said, as calm as stone. He blinked. "You what?" "I sold it," I repeated, folding my hands on the table. "It's gone." His face went pale. "That car was worth," he started, but I interrupted, voice steady. "It was worth exactly what I got for it. And that money is mine now. Just like the accounts, just like my time, my energy, my future." He froze, stunned. It took a moment for the weight of my words to land. His voice dropped low, dangerous. "The accounts, all of them?" he said. Every last dollar, I answered. Withdrawn, transferred. You won't be buying champagne in Rome with that money anymore. The look on his face was part fury, part disbelief, almost comical. For years, he'd assumed I was harmless, too meek to stand up to him. He had built his life on that assumption. Now, in one breath, I'd shattered it. He slammed the suitcase shut and straightened, trying to reclaim control. You can't do this. I won't allow it. That was when I laughed. Not cruelly, genuinely, and with relief. You won't allow it? I said. That's the problem right there. You spent decades thinking I needed your permission. I don't, not anymore. The papers are filed. The Jennifers are handling it. You don't get to allow or forbid anything in my life again. He staggered back as though my words had weight. For a long while, he only stared, mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then rage came. You ungrateful, bitter, he started. Stop, I said, holding up a hand. My voice did not shake. For years, I swallowed his insults, his dismissive remarks, his belittling. I let him shrink me until I barely knew myself. But I am done. I am not too old. I am not too weak. I am not too small. I am done. Silence fell. For the first time in our marriage, I had the last word, and he knew it. He muttered about Jennifers, about fights, about how I'd regret this, but there was no fire behind it. His bluff had been called. His cards were gone. Finally, he grabbed his suitcase and stormed for the door. You'll be nothing without me, he spat. I stood tall, hands steady at my sides. On the contrary, I said softly, without you, I am finally something. The door slammed behind him, and just like that, the weight lifted. For the first time in decades, the house wasn't filled with his presence, his criticisms, his demands. It was filled with quiet, and that quiet was mine. I sat back at the kitchen table, the very spot where I once cried over his cruel jokes about my age. Now no tears came, only peace. The reckoning was over. He had expected a wife who would wait, forgive, crumble. Instead, he came home to a woman he never truly knew, a woman who remembered her own strength. Though he left furious, defeated, lost, I had won something greater than money or revenge. I had won myself back. After he left, I half expected the old ache to return. The fear of being alone, the sting of rejection, the questions of what now. But instead I found relief. For the first time in decades, the house belonged to me. No heavy footsteps pacing the halls, no sharp voice at dinner, no judgment lingering in the air, just space. Glorious open space. I filled it with things I had once tucked away. Music I loved, photographs of family he refused to display, even lavender candles he claimed gave him headaches. Each small choice felt like reclamation. I didn't leap into wild adventures immediately. My rebirth was gentle and steady, like spring after a hard winter. I woke each morning with purpose. Some days I tended the garden, watching basil and tomatoes grow as if they too sensed the house was lighter. Other days I painted, not for praise or anyone's approval, but because the colors made me feel alive. One bright afternoon I booked a small trip of my own. Not to Italy, not yet, but to a quiet bed and breakfast by the mountains. The owner welcomed me warmly. I spent my days walking trails, breathing pine air, and writing in a journal. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every step reminded me the world hadn't shut its doors on me, no matter what he once said about being too old. I started reconnecting with people I'd lost along the way. Old friends who'd grown tired of his arrogance welcomed me back with open arms. We had lunches that spilled into afternoons, laughing over memories and making new ones. My sister visited more, filling the house with chatter and comfort. Helen's even noticed the change. You look different, one said kindly. Happier, and I was. Not because revenge satisfied me, though it felt good to watch his smugness crumble, but because something deeper had changed. I hadn't just survived. I had grown. Of course, there were lonely nights, mornings when I missed another voice in the house. But those moments felt lighter than the constant weight of living with someone who made me small. I learned that solitude isn't emptiness. Sometimes solitude is freedom. I heard about him now and then. Whispers from mutual acquaintances, bits of gossip. His secretary didn't stay once she realized his charm was only a thin veneer for control. He lost more than money in the divorce, his image, his standing. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Life has a way of catching up. What mattered was not his downfall, but my rise. I found my footing again. I proved to myself, and perhaps to every woman listening now, that it's never too late to take back your power. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun dipped low, I thought of Italy again, not with bitterness, not with longing, but with a quiet smile. I realized I didn't need Italy to prove anything. If I wanted to go someday, I would. But even if I never set foot in Venice or Tuscany, I had already found something far more important, myself. And to you listening right now, wherever you are, maybe on your couch, maybe in your kitchen, maybe alone in your car, I want to say this. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old to live, to dream, to begin again. Age isn't a cage. It can be a key if you decide to turn it. I spent too many years letting someone else define my worth. But when he walked away, I finally remembered something I should have known all along. I was never too old. I was timeless. So I tell you my story not as a victim, not as a bitter ex-wife, but as a woman reborn. My husband went to Italy with his secretary. I stayed home. I sold his car, emptied our accounts, and filed for divorce. When he came back, there was nothing waiting for him. Not the car, not the money, not the obedient wife. He thought Italy would be his victory. Instead, it became mine. Italy without me was just a trip. Italy without him was the start of my freedom. Before I close, I'll ask again, where are you watching from? I like to imagine this story traveling farther than he ever did, reaching more people than his charm ever could. And maybe, just maybe, nudging someone to realize it's never too late to choose themselves.